Hello and welcome to the top custom Hearthstone cards of the week. First up we have Dentarg the Forgetful. 7 mana, 7/7 neutral legendary, where at the start of the game, if your deck contains no spells, gain spell damage +3 for the rest of the game. So the obviously ironic thing about this card is that you get +3 spell damage, but you can't run any spells in your deck. So that means you have to somehow acquire spells. That can be with some Discover or Battlecry minions, but it also works with hero cards, like Hagatha. And that's where I see this card's biggest chance, is in some sort of Shaman Hagatha deck. Shaman has a few other resources to get you some spells early on, but if you could last long enough where you'd be able to play Hagatha, then any of the random damage spells you get would be worth quite a bit. +3 spell damage is an amazing bump in value, especially in Shaman, which can take advantage of a lot of their damaging spells. Unfortunately, in any class, getting rid of all of your spells is going to be a big detrimental to your deck. Spells make up almost half of any class's cards, and whether they're card draw, direct damage, buffs, board clears, they are really powerful and something you want to include in your deck. Dentarg the Forgetful would be incredibly hard to play, but I would be interested in a deck that goes in the opposite direction to a Spell Hunter. Maybe the reward for containing no spells would have to be even better. Next up is Drachma Goreth the Bloodlord. 10 mana, 8/12 Warlock Demon Legendary. With the battle cry, distribute this minion's attack and health among your other minions at random, then destroy it. I really like this card. It's fine if you buff this in your hand because the stats are going to go to your other minions anyways. Upon playing this, I think it would be an amazing animation of this minion getting torn apart and then added to your other minions. It works with any destructive synergies or cards that give you a reward for killing one of your own minions, and it also allows you to buff minions that have already been out on board and can attack right away. So essentially this minion is like a random buff to your other minions. And last but not least, this would be a really cool demon to resummon with Bloodreaver Gul'dan. It's definitely an expensive play for 10 mana, but you can set up your turn easily to make this card worth it. I think this card has amazing Warlock flavor, and it's not super overpowered, but it could work in basically any Warlock deck. I used this for the Rosticon Rumble card reviews, but I'm going to give this card the excellent seal of approval for design. Next up is Cobalt Miner. 3 mana, 3/2 neutral minion. With the battle cry, draw a card from your deck that didn't start in it. So there's a number of cards that you end up shuffling or putting back into your deck, and this card would specifically draw them. Sometimes these cards are bad, like Corrupted Blood or bombs that your opponent has put into your deck, but other times it could summon you a minion that you didn't have in your deck but was shuffled into it, and there are a number of other ways to use it. There's definitely a lot of classes that use this. I think most notably are probably Hunter, Priest, and Rogue. It's a simple card, but it's one of those that could really help to draw specific cards and make these sort of shuffle decks a lot faster. Maybe this would speed up certain decks a little bit too much. Maybe just to prevent this from being an issue in Tempo Rogue, it might be a better idea to make Cobalt Miner exclusively for Hunter. Next up we have Wandering Mummy. 3 mana, 3/3 priest minion. With the death rattle, add bandages to your hand. And bandages is a 1 mana spell that restores a minion to full health. I've been playing a little bit of Artifact, and there's a card that restores a minion to full health, and let me just say that it's pretty good. The only example of a card that restores a minion to full health in the game right now is Shaman's Ancestral Healing, and that card's not very good because it's just so little value. Anytime you have a cheap spell, simply just attaching it to a decent statted minion makes it so much better. So I think Wandering Mummy is pretty decent just by itself. If you're playing a big priest, you can hold on to bandages to combo later with Shadow Reaper Anduin, and also to heal your big minions. Really though, big priest doesn't need this card, so more likely I think it would be for a Death Rattle Quest priest. If you go in the super controlled direction, then playing Wandering Mummy not only helps you get to your quest faster, but the bandages can actually be useful on some of your bigger minions that you play. I think a lot of the time you are going to get some value with bandages, but it's not really going to be the heal that you're using this for. It's going to be the minion's death rattle and the cheap spell for priest. It's a simple minion, a simple spell, but I think flavor wise combined they work really well, and I think priest is the perfect class for this to play in. And next up is Ark Mage Merlin. 8 mana, 4/5 legendary mage Murloc. With the battle cry, draw a Murloc and a spell. The spell becomes the Murloc's battle cry. So for 8 mana, you're only getting a 4/5 Murloc, which is obviously not very good, but the idea is if you have a lot of big spells in your deck, then you'll be able to play your Murloc, which is usually pretty cheap, and activate the battle cry for a lot of value. This works really well with a card like Flame Strike, where for only 2 mana, you'd be able to deal 4 damage to your enemy's board. Now it's not 100% clear on how the Murloc's battle cry would specifically work. If it just says battle cry, cast, insert spell here, then a card like Pyroblast would probably be random. But you could also interpret the battle cry as you specifically being able to target something with that spell. Then for very little mana, you could end up dealing 10 damage. I would prefer the random one for specifically targeting spells, but either way, you're giving up a lot in order to play this card. First off is the 8 mana for the 4/5 stats. But because Murlocs are so cheap, there's a good chance you'll also be able to play the Murloc that you draw if you have 10 mana. But the thing is, you also have to put Murlocs into your deck. Now, not too long ago, there was a Ark Mage aggro sort of deck. I don't know if a deck like that is still roaming around, but it's definitely not a top tier deck anymore. The thing is, you'd have to draw this card before you drew all of your Murlocs. And maybe there could be a Mage Murloc deck that includes a lot of Murlocs in the early game, and then has some sort of late game spell, Spiteful Summon, or combo. I don't know if I'd want to promote that type of deck, but I don't know how good it would necessarily be. I don't know, I have conflicting opinions about this card. I love Murlocs, but maybe it promotes Big Spell Mage a little bit too much. Part of me also wishes this was actually for Warlock, because comboing a cheap Murloc with a crazy destructive spell, plus a card like Glinda, would be a lot of fun. Let me know what you think. Next up is Alternate Universe. 10 mana Druid spell, activate all choose one effects that you did not choose this game. Targets chosen randomly. So with this card, some of them make sense initially, but others need a bit more explaining. So for the transforming minion choose ones, this card would simply summon the minion that did not get chosen. The damage goes to random minions, whether they're friendly or enemy minions, and probably the most interesting is Malfurion. With this hero card, and specifically the hero power, it's always a choose one. That means if you were to choose the armor 5 times, it would grant your hero 15 attack when playing this card. I've been trying to get the Gonk combo, and I have to say if I had this card, maybe it would be a little bit easier. Still, I think in concept this card is a good idea. It really promotes choose one cards, and also a bit of a slower game pace. I'm really a fan of choose one in Druid. It's one of the more unique type of cards that really emphasizes on flexibility as opposed to purely just power level or stats. But maybe make it exclusively towards cards, and not the hero card hero power. Last up, I wanted to try something a little bit different. So the Custom Hearthstone subreddit has weekly design competitions. There's some sort of requirement, and then they encourage people to submit card designs in the comments down below. People vote on which one is the best, and there's a winner every week. This week's task was to design a card that did something related to mana crystals. And so I made my own card, Crystal Chucker. I wish I could have used less card text, but this is the best I could do. 1 mana mage spell with Echo, throw one of your mana crystals at a minion. It deals 3 damage. And overkill, gain a mana crystal. By throwing your mana crystal, it means essentially you're destroying one of your mana crystals and using it to deal damage to a minion. So while this is really cheap removal and you can cast it as many times as you want, each time you spend 1 mana, you're also destroying the mana crystal that you just used up. In the case of where this would cost 0 because of a spell cost reduction card, it would first take away any mana crystals you already spent, but then it would start to take away the mana crystals you still could spend that turn. On top of this, as soon as you run out of all of your mana crystals and you're at 0 out of 0 mana, then you can't cast the spell, even if it does cost 0 mana. But overkill is the way around this card's negative effect. After you throw a mana crystal at a minion, if you're able to overkill it, whether that be just with the 3 damage, or maybe if you improve this card with spell damage, then you'll get another empty mana crystal. Now, I could specify that you gain an empty mana crystal, but I think at that point the card text is just too much. So I wish this card was a little bit more self-explanatory just based off of the text, but I really like it because not only is it a unique sort of animation, but I also feel like it works in a lot of different mage decks. Obviously, this works in spell damage, and I think a tempo deck could also use this as cheap removal. You could go completely wild with this card and just clear the entire enemy board, but unless you have a lot of spell damage, you're probably going to end up setting yourself back with some of those mana crystals. Usually, I'm not a fan of cheap spells, and this one's still a little bit odd with such a terrible setback if you don't get the overkill requirement. Let me know what you think about the design in the comments down below, and you have until Saturday to design a card involving mana crystals and submit it to the subreddit post. I'll put a link down below to the post where you could submit your cards and also a link to where you can make them. Anyways, that is going to be all for this week. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, ta-ta.